بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. وصرح القاضي أبو بكر بن العربي في شرح البخاري بأن ذلك شرط البخاري، وأجاب عما أورد عليه من ذلك بجواب فيه نظر، لأنه قال: فإن قيل حديث الأعمال بالنيات فرد لم يروه عن عمر إلا علقمة، قال: قلنا قد خطب به عمر على المنبر بحضرة الصحابة، فلولا أنهم يعرفونه لأنكروه كذا قال. In the previous lesson, we discussed the views of Imam Hakim rahimahullah. The statement that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah quoted here in Nuzha an-Naḍar was from Ma'arifah Ulum al-Ḥadīth, you remember, and it was regarding the conditions of an authentic narration. That Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he assumed that Imam Hakim rahimahullah was of the view that a narration has to be aziz, then only it will be sahih. So we explained that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he misunderstood the statement of Imam Hakim rahimahullah. Thereafter, we also discussed what Imam Hakim rahimahullah wrote in another book of his, Al-Madkhal ila Kitab al-Iklil, and that was whether Imam Bukhari rahimahullah and Imam Muslim rahimahullah, whether they regarded it to be conditional for a narration to be aziz, then only they would narrate it in their books. Here in Nuzha an-Naḍar, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he did not mention the second view of Imam Hakim rahimahullah. However, in the text ahead, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentions this about Imam Bukhari rahimahullah stipulating that a narration has to be aziz, then only he would cite it in his Sahih. So Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he quoted from another scholar, and that is Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Ishbili, who is famously known as Ibn Al-Arabī rahimahullah. He was born in the year 468 Hijri, and he passed away in the year 583 Hijri. So Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he writes: وصرح القاضي أبو بكر بن العربي في شرح البخاري بأن ذلك شرط البخاري. That Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, he very clearly mentioned in his commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari that this was a condition of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, that a narration has to be aziz, then only he would narrate it. So before exploring the statement, we must first understand who Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah was. What was the status of the person who is making this comment? Al-Madhabi rahimahullah, he refers to him as Al-Imam al-Allamatul Hafiz al-Qadi. You can see what great terms he used for him. Extremely knowledgeable. He calls him first an Imam, that he was a leader, extremely knowledgeable. He was a Hafiz of Ḥadīth, and he was also a Qadi. He then says, وَكَانَ ثَاقِبَ الذَّهْن, that he was sharp-minded, عذب المنطق, extremely eloquent and very sweet, the words which we would use. Kareem al-Shama'il, that he had noble character. Kamil al-Su'dad, he was like, he had a lot of authority. Waliya Qada Ishbiliya, that he became the Qadi of Ishbiliya. فَحُمِدَتْ سِيَاسَتُهُ, and the way he presented himself as a leader, it was very praiseworthy. وَكَانَ ذَا شِدَّةٍ وَسَطْوَةٍ, but because he was very stern and extremely strict, so that led to him being dismissed. And then وَأَقْبَلَ عَلَى نَشْرِ الْعِلْمِ وَتَدْوِينِ, he then dedicated himself to writing and spreading knowledge. To sum up how great he was, Allama Dhahabi rahimahullah then says, كان القاضي أبو بكر ممن يقال إنه بلغ رتبة الاجتهاد. That Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi rahimahullah, he was of such great status that it was said regarding him, إنه بلغ رتبة الاجتهاد, that definitely indeed he has reached the status of ijtihad. But despite that, in spite of being so great that people are saying he reached the status of ijtihad, Ibn al-Arabi rahimahullah, he still held rigidly to his madhab. He was still a staunch Maliki. On a side note, you can see how fair we Hanafis are. That you can see I'm praising Ibn al-Arabi rahimahullah, although he spoke against our Imam. in his commentary of Muwatta, he said, وَأَمَّا أَبُو حَنِيفَةَ فَهُوَ أَعْجَمِيٌّ فَلَا يُسْتَنْكَرُ عَلَيْهِ الْجَهْلِ بِهَذِهِ الْمَسْأَلَةِ. That as for Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he's like, undermining Imam Abu Hanifa, that he's a non-Arab. So therefore, if he doesn't know this mas'ala, then it's not unusual, it's not unexpected. فأراد أن يتفصح ويتفقه ليثبت دعواه في العربية. He's saying that Imam Abu Hanifa merely attempted, he tried to portray his knowledge of Arabic to establish this ruling in Arabic. So you can see how he's undermining Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. Nonetheless, Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, he was a very knowledgeable and an erudite scholar. So we are discussing the view of a very great Imam. Now looking at this text here, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he claims that Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, he mentioned this view in his commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari. Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, he was probably the third known person to write a commentary on Sahih al-Bukhari. The first known person was Allama Khattabi rahimahullah. So Allama Khattabi rahimahullah, he lived between the years 319 Hijri to 388 Hijri. Remember I told you about knowing the era, knowing the dates of birth and dates of demise. So please make a note of this here, that Allama Khattabi was born in 319 Hijri and he passed away in 388 Hijri. And the name of his commentary is A'lamul Ḥadīth fi Sharh Sahih al-Bukhari. So alhamdulillah, this commentary is printed. It was edited by Muhammad ibn Sa'ad al-Sa'ud and it was circulated by the al-Qura University in Mecca. And it was also Sheikh Muhammad Ali and Ali Mustafa Daydan tahqiq of it, and it was published by Darul Kutub al-Ilmiyah. So that's the first known commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari. The second known person to write a commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari was Abu Ja'far al-Azdi. So his name was Ahmad ibn Muhammad al-Dawudi and he passed away in the year 402 Hijri. So when did I say that Allama Khattabi rahimahullah passed away, the one who wrote the first commentary? Ji, mashallah, in the year 388 Hijri. So this person, he passed away 14 years later. This was his date of demise. But with regards to his date of birth, that is unknown. So we don't know when he was born. Qadi Ijāzah rahimahullah, he mentions about the scholar, وَكَانَ فَقِيهًا فَاضِلًا مُتَفَنِّنًا مُؤَلِّفًا مُجِيدًا لَهُ حِفْظٌ مِنَ اللِّسَانِ وَالْحَدِيثِ وَالنَّظْرِ. He explains that what a great faqih he was and how knowledgeable he was in, whether it was in lugha, in his memory in language, and also in hadith and in philosophy. So the name of Allama Dawudi's commentary is an-Nasiha fi Sharh al-Bukhari. But unfortunately, this commentary is not printed and there are no known copies of it. We don't know whether makhtut, where the manuscripts of this is, whether it is available or whether it's now lost and unknown, whether it's mafqud. However, there were many scholars in the past who did have access to this. Now, how do we know that these scholars in the past had access to this commentary? Is because we find that they were quoting from this commentary, and they can only quote from it if they had access to it, isn't it? So that's the second commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari. The third commentary is that which Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah is referring to. Yeah, it was by Allama ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah. So when did we say was Allama ibn al-Arabī was born? He was born in 468 Hijri and he passed away in 543 Hijri. So the title of his commentary is an-Nayyirain fi Sharh as-Sahihain. So from the title you can see that it's not just a commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari, but it's also a commentary of Sahih Muslim. But unfortunately, this commentary is still in manuscript form. So alhamdulillah, the makhtut of it is available. It is known where this makhtut is, but it has not yet been printed. If it is typed out and printed, it will be around 80 volumes. Can you imagine? 80 volumes. So that shows that Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah was extremely knowledgeable. It shows you how much knowledge he possessed. So we're not talking of some ordinary person here or some average scholar. We're talking of a very, very great expert in hadith. I'm just thinking maybe one of you guys, if you are interested, then you can get hold of this makhtut and type it out and make tahqiq of it. Probably one of you, it won't be sufficient if one person alone has to attempt to do it, because it is in 80 volumes. It will be in 80 volumes, unless if you have barakah in your time, like what Allama Ibn Al-Arabī rahimahullah had, because besides this here, he wrote so many other commentaries, his commentary on Tirmidhi and his commentary on the Muwatta, but yet this one book of his would be in 80 volumes. So like how Shaykh Nuruddin Atr, we mentioned in the beginning, in the preludes, that he got a whole of the manuscript and he typed out this, and then you can see in the footnotes he made tahqiq of it. In the same way, inshallah, one of you could consider getting hold of this manuscript and typing it out and making tahqiq of the entire kitab. Now, because I don't have access to this manuscript, so I'm unable to refer back to the exact source and check what are the precise wording of Allama Ibn Al-Arabī rahimahullah, and therefore I would have to now rely on someone who quoted from him. So in Tadrib al-Rawi, Allama Suyuti rahimahullah, he quotes the words of Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, and he quotes it saying, وَإِنَّمَا بَنَى الْبُخَارِيُّ كِتَابَهُ عَلَى حَدِيثٍ يَرْوِيهِ أَكْثَرْ مِنْ وَاحِدٍ. That indeed Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he based his book on narrations which on such narrations where more than one person narrated it. So this is what he mentions in his commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari, and probably Ibn Hajar rahmallah had access to the kitab. Maybe there's other wording of his. These are the probable wording that we would know about, because we find that Allama Suyuti rahmallah is quoting it. Besides mentioning this in the commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari, Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, he also mentioned something similar in his commentary of Jami' al-Tirmidhi and in his commentary of the Muwatta. So in his commentary of Jami' al-Tirmidhi, and the title of that is Aridatul Ahwadi, so he mentions under the narration of Wattuhuru Ma'uhu, the famous narration, he says that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah did not narrate this because only one person narrates it from one person. وقد قال البخاري هو صحيح ولكن لم يخرجه لأنه رواه واحد عن واحد. So this is in his commentary of Jami' al-Tirmidhi. Then Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, his main statement that we have access to is what he mentions in his commentary of the Muwatta. Because here in his commentary of the Muwatta, he did not only attribute this view to Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, but he also made rid of it, and he also refuted Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. So he wrote, وَأَمَّا حَدِيثُ عُرْوَةٍ, that regarding the narration of Urwa, this is about spending the day and night in Arafah, and then performing the Fajr Salah on the next day in Muzdalifah, that the narration. So he says, فَقَدْ تَرَكَهُ الْإِمَامَانِ, that the two Imams, that Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahimahullah, they did not transmit it in their Sahihs. Why did not transmit it? لأنه لم يروه عن عروة إلا واحد, because only one person narrates it from Urwa. وَكَانَ مَذْهَبُهُمَا أَنَّ الْحَدِيثَ لَا يُثْبِتَانِهِ حَتَّى يَرْوِيَهُ اثْنَانِ. You can see very emphatically he's mentioning it, that their methodology was that they did not narrate a hadith unless two people, they did not quote a narration in their books unless two people transmitted it. Thereafter he says, وَهَذَا مَذْهَبٌ بَاطِلٌ, that this methodology is baseless. وَهُوَ مَذْهَبُ الْقَدَرِيَّةِ بَلْ رِوَايَةُ الْوَاحِدِ عَنِ الْوَاحِدِ صَحِيحَةٌ إِلَى النَّبِيِّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. Now if you look, you can see on the next page, on page 49, if you got the same print as us. So if you don't have the same print as us, then just look about 2 paragraphs ahead. You can see that قال ابن رشيد, that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he is quoting the statement of Abu Abdullah ibn Rushayd rahimahullah. وَلَقَدْ كَانَ يَكْفِي الْقَاضِي فِي بُطْلَانِ مَنْ دَعَى أَنَّهُ شَرْطُ الْبُخَارِ أَوَّلُ حَدِيثٍ مَذْكُورٍ فِيهِ. So inshallah we'll discuss the statement in detail when we come there. But this statement was made by Allama ibn Rushayd rahimahullah in response to this allegation and this criticism of Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah. Actually, let us go through the full statement now. So the full sentence that Ibn Rushd rahmallah mentioned, it comes in Tawjih an-Naḍar. His words are al-ajabu minhu كيف يدعي عليه ما ذلك. That is so astonishing. How can he make this claim against Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahimahullah? ثم يزعم أنه مذهب باطل. And thereafter he claims that this methodology is baseless. فليت شعري من أعلمه بأنه ما اشترط ذلك. Who he's saying that who informed him that they stipulated it. إن كان منقولا فليبين طريقة. That if it's transmitted, maybe he found it in some other book, he must mention his source. From where is he getting this here? So that we can also go back and see what are the exact words. Probably he must understood a statement. وإن كان عرفه بالاستقراء فقد وهم في ذلك. If he done it through his own research and his own deductions, then yeah, definitely he has made a mistake. ولقد كان يكفيه في ذلك أول حديث في البخاري. So this here is how Ulama Ibn Rushd rahmallah responded to this allegation and the statement of Ibn Al-Arabī rahimahullah. Now, a point to mention on the side, that I told you, you must learn this methodology and have a sharp mind. So, this is a statement of Ibn Rushd rahimahullah, and it's not a statement of Ibn Hibban rahimahullah. The commentary, if you have, and if you are following in the commentary of an Nadhar, then in our printed copy of an Nadhar, the statement is attributed to Allama Ibn Hibban rahimahullah. And this here is obviously incorrect, because Ibn Hibban rahimahullah, he passed away in the year 354 Hijri. And Ibn Al-Arabī rahimahullah, when did I say he was born? 468 Hijri. So there is no way that Ibn Hibban rahimahullah could have objected on Ibn Al-Arabī, because he passed away long before Ibn Al-Arabī was even born. And this here again, what we mentioned from the very beginning, learning the dates and knowing the era in which every scholar lived. So here you can see that we now are sure that this here is not a statement of Ibn Hibban rahmallah, rather it's a statement of Ibn Rushd, just because of looking at the date of demise of Ibn Hibban and the date of birth of Allama Ibn Al-Arabī rahimahullah. Now you might wonder that we've just mentioned Ibn Al-Arabī rahimahullah, he was such a great scholar and he even reached the status of ijtihad. So if he was such a great scholar, then how did he make such a clear blunder? We even students who are going through Sahih al-Bukhari, they would not make such an allegation or such a comment. And here he's writing such a huge commentary. So obviously when he's writing the commentary, he's focusing on each and every narration, isn't it? So he ought to have known about the narrators. So one possible response is that Ibn Al-Arabī rahimahullah focused more on the mutun of the ahadith, on explaining the text of the ahadith, and perhaps he did not pay much attention to the narrator. So he didn't look at the sanad at all, rather his entire focus was on explaining the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the Sahaba, or the Tabi'in, or whoever Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is quoting. So this here is a possible response, and I can only say it's a possible response because obviously I have not read Allama Ibn Al-Arabī rahmahullah's commentary. When if a person has to get hold of his commentary and read it, then he will be able to confirm whether this is indeed the case. But for us, we just get this idea from Ibrahim al-Lahim, that he wrote in his explanation here. He said, وَابْنُ الْعَرَبِ مِنَ الْمُحَدِّثِينَ لَكِنْ اهْتِمَامُهُ كَانَ بِالْمُتُونِ وَلَيْسَ هُوَ مِنْ أَهْلِ الصَّنْعَ فِيهِ. So Sheikh Ibrahim Lahim hafidhahullah, he is mentioning that Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, his concern and his focus was the text. He's not an expert in issues pertaining to the chains. And this here also applies to the asatidha of the final year, isn't it? That when they're explaining the narration, then they concentrate mainly on the text of the narration. They hardly research or mention anything regarding the narrators. Unless maybe it's necessary, like in Sunan Abi Dawud, where you have the comments of Imam Abu Dawud rahmallah, or in Jami' al-Tirmidhi, but generally they do not focus or look too much on the narrators. Rather, the entire focus is on the mutun of the hadith. So probably Ibn al-Arabī rahmallah, this is how his commentary is. Wallahu a'lam. Now Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he quotes Allama Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah's response to objections that were raised against him, because now he's making this claim, but everybody know that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he did not have this condition. So then they raised objections upon him, and they said that the very first narration, you can see that statement of Ibn Rushayd, which Hafiz Ibn Hajar is bringing later, and we already quoted, that the very first narration is a narration which has only one narrator in some links. So the very first narration is not Aziz. So how can you claim that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah has stipulated it as a condition? So Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, he attempted to respond. وَأَجَابَ عَمَّا أُورِدَ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ بِجَوَابٍ فِيهِ نَظْرٌ. That he responded regarding what was raised against him with an answer, but in this answer of his فِيهِ نَظْرٌ, this answer is not accurate. Why? Because he said that if someone is to object upon us and someone has to say that the first narration, al-a'malu bin niyat, so Imam Bukhari does narrate it like this without the word innama as well, although in the beginning he uses the word innama, but here nevertheless is indicating towards that narration. So the first narration of Bukhari, fardun, it's a singular report. In some links there are only one narrator. Lam yarwihi an Umar illa alqama. For example, you have Umar radiallahu anhu who is transmitting it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But who's transmitting it from Umar radiallahu anhu? Only Al-Qama is narrating from him. So here you have only one person who is quoting from the Sahabi. So Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah said that we can respond to this objection, and we'll say قد خطب به عمر على المنبر بحضرة الصحابة فلولا أنهم يعرفونه لأنكروه. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he dismisses and say كذا قال, that Umar radiallahu anhu, he narrated it on the mimbar, on the pulpit, in the presence of other Sahaba. So if they did not know about this narration, then they would have stood up, they would have disapproved him, they would have criticized him. From where did you get this narration? Sahaba radiallahu anhu would not maintain silence, isn't it? So this here is what Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah is responding to, that this very first narration of Bukhari, it's transmitted by only one narrator from the Sahabi. So Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, he's saying that if Umar radiallahu anhu delivered this here, and if he quoted it on the pulpit on a Friday when the masjid was filled to the brim, and not a single Sahabi, and there was also probably Tabi'in were present, so not a single Sahabi or not a single Tabi'in in that congregation objected, then he claims that this here is sufficient evidence that all the Sahaba, at least, they were very well acquainted with this narration. And although in reality it might seem that there are less than two narrators, technically due to the presence of so many Sahaba, it will be as if there are much more than two narrators, not only two narrators in the first link. So this is how he attempted to respond to the allegations raised against him. But this objection of his, it holds no weight. Allama Qasim rahimahullah, he mentioned that, leave alone being correct, he says that this response doesn't even make sense. He say حاصل السؤال أنه لم يرويه عن عمر إلا واحد. That let's scrutinize the question, the objection, and the answer. The crux, the gist of the question is that only one person is narrating it from Umar. وحاصل الجواب أنه قد رواه عمر وغيره. That you saying that Sahaba were present. So you're not even talking about those who would be students of Umar radiallahu anhu. So you are saying that other Sahaba also heard it from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. فَلَا يَمَصُّ هَذَا الْجَوَابِ السُّؤَالِ بِوَجْهٍ وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. But Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda rahimahullah, he mentioned that the response of Allama Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah is actually valid. So in a third footnote of page 71 of Dhafr al-Amani, he wrote, قلت بل الجواب صحيح. He said that the answer is correct. Now on this here, that the fact that Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda rahimahullah is saying بل الجواب صحيح, don't assume that Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda rahimahullah is accepting the view of Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah and is agreeing with him. Rather, he's just saying that Allama Qasim is saying that it doesn't make sense. So here you can translate the word sahih as saying that it does make sense. It has some validity. Although it's incorrect, but it's not against logic. You understand? That it's Balil Jawab Sahih. It's an incorrect answer, but it does not defy logic. It does make a sense. And then also, since in this footnote, Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda rahimahullah, he then wrote, وَإِرَادُ السَّخَاوِي غَيْرُ وَجِهِ. So he said, وَإِرَادُ السَّخَاوِي, and the allegation of Alama Sakhawi is unfounded. So here he incorrectly took the name of Alama Sakhawi rahimahullah. It is actually Alama Qasim rahimahullah. They were both students of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, but Alama Qasim, he is the one who passed these remarks. So nevertheless, Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, he simply assumed that because Umar radiallahu anhu quoted this narration on the mimbar, on the pulpit, the entire congregation knew the narration. And he's quoted as saying, فَعُمَرْ ذَكَّرَهُمْ لَا أَخْبَرَهُم, that Umar merely reminded them that they knew it. So he's not informing them of a new narration, he's simply reminding them. Ḥafīth ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he offers a counter response to this answer of Alama ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, and he says, وَتُعُقِّبَ بِأَنَّهُ لَا يَلْزَمُ مِنْ كَوْنِهِمْ سَكَتُوا عَنْهُ أَن يَكُونُوا سَمِعُوهُ مِنْ غَيْرِهِ. That it's refuted. It doesn't mean that the fact that they all remain silent, it means that they heard the narration from others, they heard it before. كمال ابن أبي شريف رحمه الله, he explained, هذا لا يلاقي السؤال لأن جهة الإيراد تفرد علقمة عن عمر ولا يلزم من خطبة عمر به على المنبر أن يكون رواه غير علقمة إذ لا يلزم من السماع الرواية. What's the question? The question is, or the objection, that Alqamah is the only one transmitting it from Umar radiallahu anhu. And the answer is that Umar radiallahu anhu quoted it on the mimbar and no one objected. So he's saying, لا يلزم من السماع الرواية. Even if you have to say, okay, they all heard it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they did not transmit it. We don't have proof that they also quoted this narration. So therefore, it does not, and here when we're talking about Aziz, we are talking about the riwayah of a narration, that you have in every link two people who are narrating, who are making riwayah of the narration, not just who heard the narration. Alama Munawiyah rahimahullah, he said regarding the statement of Alama ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah, وَقَوْلُهُ ذَكَّرَهُمْ لَأَخْبَرَهُم مِّن قَبِيلِ الرَّجْمِ بِالْغَيْبِ. He said that he's just shooting in the dark. It's like guesswork. while احتمال كون السكوت لقبول الخبر لا لمعرفة ما أخبر به. That they all held Umar radiallahu anhu in such esteem. They knew the great status of Umar radiallahu anhu and how close he was to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when they heard him quoting it, maybe they felt that he's a trustworthy, a very reliable person quoting it, and therefore we'll accept it from him. It does not mean that they had knowledge of this narration. So in short, the fact that Umar radiallahu anhu quoted the narration on the mimbar does not prove that the others knew the narration, let alone that they even narrated it. So that's the first answer that Hafiz ibn Hajar rahmallah presents. The second answer, he says, وَبِأَنَّ هَذَا لَوْ سُلِّمَ فِي عُمَرَ مُنِعَ فِي تَفَرُّدِ عَلْقَمَةٍ ثُمَّ تَفَرَّدَ مُحَمَّدْ بن إبراهيم به عن علقمة ثم تفرد يحيى بن سعيد به عن محمد على ما هو الصحيح المعروف عند المحدثين. MashaAllah, many of you completed Sahih al-Bukhari. Probably you might know the sanad of the first narration of Bukhari of by heart. So he's saying, okay, Alqamah. Now the link below Alqamah is who? Who narrated it from Alqamah? Muhammad ibn Ibrahim. But Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, he's the only person who narrated it from Alqamah. So even if you say, okay, ala sabil tanazzul, that we'll just accept your answer, that okay, Ibn al-Arabī rahmallah, he gave a response, we'll just assume that this here is very convincing. So okay, in the tabaqa, in the link, in the era of or in the link rather, in the link of Alqamah, there's only there were many narrators, but then you have Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, who's the only person quoting it from Alqamah. And then you have ثم تفرد يحيى بن سعيد به عن محمد. Yahya ibn Sa'id, he's the only one quoting it from Muhammad. So if you want to write it down to understand it better, you can write it down that you have Yahya ibn Sa'id, right? He's the one in the bottom. He is only one person quoting it from, you can put like an arrow going up, however you want to put it. He's the only person quoting it from Muhammad ibn Ibrahim. Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, he's the only person quoting it from Alqamah. Alqama is the only person quoting it from Umar, and Umar radiallahu anhu is the only person quoting it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So even if you have to now say that, okay, in the era of Umar and in the link of Alqama there were multiple narrators, you still have here that Alqama is the only person quoting from Umar radiallahu anhu. And Muhammad ibn Ibrahim then is the only person narrating from Alqama. And Yahya ibn Sa'id is the only one narrating from Muhammad. And then he says, على ما هو صحيح المعروف عند المحدثين. This here is very well known. It's a common knowledge according to all the muhaddithin. So it's only from Yahya ibn Sa'id that this narration proliferated and spread to such an extent that 700 people then narrated it from him. Mullah al-Qari rahmallah, he writes in his commentary, ثم اشتهر عن يحيى حتى كتبه عنه 700. That then it spread from Yahya, it became popular and famous from Yahya until 700 people narrated it from him. So in at least 3 links there is tafarrud, and therefore this narration there is no way that it can be aziz. And this here is the argument then stands that from the very first narration we can clearly prove that indeed Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he did not stipulate that a narration has to have 2 narrators. And then Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he now takes note of a su'al muqaddar. So again, we going beyond time. So what do you prefer? Do you prefer that we continue a little as this, we complete this paragraph? Probably it might take about, I'm not good in estimating time, but I would assume maybe about 10 more minutes. Okay, inshallah. So please, sorry about this. It's actually in all, whenever I'm teaching, I always have this problem of going over time. There's no barakah in our explanations. So nevertheless, now Ibn Hajar rahmallah, he took note of a su'al muqaddar, a possible objection. And this is that there are some other chains which could support this narration. And therefore, even in those 3 links, yes, when narrating it from Umar radiallahu anhu, there's one person narrating from one person, narrating from one person. But if we consider those other links, then in every tabaqah, in that generation, you will have multiple people. You understand? So although multiple people are quoting the same narration, although they are quoting it from different teachers who are quoting it from different people who are quoting it from different narrators. So this is what Ibn Hajar rahmallah took note of, and then he responds to it and says, وَقَدْ وَرَدَتْ لَهُمْ مُتَابَعَاتْ لَا يُعْتَبَرُ بِهَا. That there are mutaba'at, there are alternate chains, there are supporting chains which have been transmitted, but they are not considered. So this is what he mentioned here in the book. Now when he was teaching this book, then he explained it. So Allama Qasim rahimahullah, he quotes the explanation of Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, that why did he bring this statement. أفاد المصنف رحمه الله في تقرير هذا بأن هذا إشارة إلى أن المتابعات التي وردت لهذا الكتاب لا تخرجه عن كونه فردا لضعفها. أن المتابعات التي وردت لهذا الحديث, this comes in Al-Qawl Mubtakar on page 39, that all the mutaba'at that are quoted for this narration لا تخرجه عن كونه فردا, it does not take out this narration from being a solitary narration, a narration that's transmitted by only a singular narrators. Why? Because all of those are extremely weak. So just to give you some insight on the mutaba'at so that you can understand better, Alama Abu Nu'aym rahimahullah, he quoted what his chain that reaches to Abdul Majid ibn Abdul Aziz ibn Abi Rawad, and he quotes an Malik ibn Anas and Zayd ibn Aslam. So here he's quoting that Malik is narrating from Zayd ibn Aslam. Make note of this point. Imam Malik is narrating from Zayd ibn Aslam and Ata ibn Yasar an Abi Sa'id al-Khudri, and then قال Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam إنما الأعمال بالنيات ولكل امرئ ما نوى إلى آخر الحديث. So as you can see, that this here is a completely different Sahabi, that it's quoting from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. After quoting this, Alama Abu Nu'aym rahimahullah, he commented غريب من حديث مالك عن Zayd. So that's why I told you to take note that Imam Malik, that Abu Nu'aym is quoting it with this chain that's linking to Abdul Majid, that he's quoting, Imam Malik is narrating it from Zayd. However, Imam Malik did not narrate it from Zayd ibn Aslam. Rather, Imam Malik rahmallah narrated it from Yahya ibn Sa'id. And how do we know that Imam Malik narrated it from Yahya ibn Sa'id? He's saying that it's so famous, it's so common that it's like, popularly known. And Imam Malik quoted this from Yahya ibn Sa'id. I just told you that there were 700 people, 700 narrators who quoted it from Yahya ibn Sa'id. Imam Malik rahmallah, he was one of them. He also quoted it from Yahya ibn Sa'id. Even in his Muwatta, he quotes it from Yahya ibn Sa'id. So this person, Abdul Majid, he made a mistake, and therefore Ibn Abi Hatim rahimahullah, he says, قال أبي هذا حديث باطل ليس له أصل. This here is باطل ليس له أصل. It has no أصل. إنما هو مالك عن يحيى بن سعيد عن محمد بن إبراهيم التيمي عن علقمة بن وقاص عن عمر عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So this here is just one sanad which you can see from a different Sahabi. And the reason why we are not giving any consideration to it is because it is a clear mistake. Like, Alama Khalili rahimahullah, he also said that Abdul Majid ibn Abdul Aziz ibn Abi Rawad thiqa, that this person here, Abdul Majid, he is reliable. لكنه أخطأ في أحاديث. But there are times when he made mistakes, and then he quotes this very narration as an example of where Abdul Aziz made a mistake. So this here is just one other Sahabi, but you can see there was a mistake. If you look at طرح التطريب, Alama Iraqi rahimahullah, he says that فوقفت عليه مسندا من غير طريق عمر من حديث أبي سعيد الخدري وأبي هريرة وأنس وعلي. So you can see here there are many other Sahaba, Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, Anas radiyallahu anhu, Ali. So this here, now it could raise the question, isn't it, that if you have at least 5 Sahaba who are quoting it, Umar radiyallahu an, Abu Sa'id Khudri, Abu Hurairah, Anas, and Ali radiyallahu an, a minimum of 5, then wouldn't this have a chance of being mashhur? Or even maybe can't we claim that it's mutawatir? Because you remember when we were discussing mutawatir, we say that we do not even consider the chains, and you don't look at whether the asanid are authentic, whether the narrators are reliable, etc. So why can't we say that this here is mutawatir? You understand the question? That if you have 5 Sahaba who are quoting it, then why can we not say that it's mutawatir, even though the narrations to those Sahaba are weak and we only have it through one authentic sanad? So the reason why we did not consider the additional chains, and it's, you can say I alluded to it now, is that it's very clear that these narrators made mistakes. So we are convinced that it is not established from these Sahaba. That yes, if there was some basis, maybe if it was possible that it was from these Sahaba, then we would have said, okay, it's narrated through multiple. But here we clearly know that Abdul Majid is actually making a mistake here. Imam Malik rahimahullah did not narrate this particular narration. Probably he narrated something else, and Abdul Majid maybe was assumed that this sanad is for the narration of innamal a'malu bin niyyat. Thereafter, Hafiz ibn Hajar rahimahullah, now he highlights that this here is all only about the first narration. But there are so many other narrations within Sahih al-Bukhari that are transmitted with only one chain. So he says, وَكَذَلِكَ لَا يُسْلَمُ جَوَابُهُ وَلَا يَسْلَمُ جَوَابُهُ فِي غَيْرِ حَدِيثِ عُمَرٍ. Likewise, his response is not accepted in the other narrations besides the narration of Umar. So now to quote it from an earlier source, Allama ibn Hajar rahmallah, he brings the statement of Ibn Rushayd, and that is what we quoted to earlier. You remember we came to this text that قال ابن رشيد وَلَقَدْ كَانَ يَكْفِي الْقَاضِي فِي بُطْلَانِ مَا ادَّعَى أَنَّهُ شَرْطُ الْبُخَارِ أول حديث مذكور فيه. That Ibn Rushayd rahimahullah, he said that it's sufficient to break the argument of Qadi, the very first narration that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah has brought. So Abu Rushayd, he is Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Amr ibn Muhammad al-Fahri al-Andalusi. He was born in the year 657 Hijri, and he lived in Granada in Spain. You can see in the footnotes how Sheikh Nuruddin Itr describes him. وَكَانَ فَرِيدَ دَهْرِهِ عَدَالَةً وَجَلَالَةً وَحِفْظًا وَأَدَبًا وَسَمْتًا وَهَدْيًا. That, you know, he was like this extraordinary person, whether it was in terms of his honesty, his greatness, his memory, his akhlaq, his etiquettes, his temperament, and his habits. And he passed away in the year 721. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that in an-Naḍar, the statement is attributed to Allama Ibn Hibban rahimahullah, but that is a slip. Probably it's just a typing error, because Ibn Hibban rahimahullah, he passed away in 345 Hijri. So that's long before Allama Ibn Al-Arabī rahimahullah was even born, because he was only born in 468 Hijri. So it's not possible for Allama Ibn Hibban rahimahullah to refute Ibn al-Arabī rahimahullah. Now, those of you who got the copy of Im'an an-Naḍar, please, you must also make a note of this in your copy. One day when you're teaching Nuzha an-Naḍar, then do not make the mistake of attributing this to Ibn Hibban rahimahullah. And the reason why I have to notify you of what's in the commentaries also is because I have hope that all of you, inshallah, one day you will teach this book. Because, you know, in the Darul Ulums, when students study Nuzha an-Naḍar, then for them it is just one additional subject. Just like how they have a subject for Mishkat, and they have a period for Jalalain, and then they have a session for Hidayah. So one subject in the 5th year is for Nuzha an-Naḍar. But the fact that all of you took out time to study this book, and most of you are studying it for this, studying this kitab for the 2nd time. Some of you, mashallah, you're also studying it now for the 3rd time. So I trust that inshallah you will probably end up teaching this kitab. So when you are teaching this kitab and you come across the text in Im'an an-Naḍar, where a statement is attributed to Ibn Hibban rahmallah, then understand that it's just a slip of the pen, because Ibn Hibban rahmallah passed away before Ibn al-Arabī rahmallah was even born. So please try to make a note of it in Im'an an-Naḍar. And this year, sorry, these thoughts come to mind. I know time is up. It also shows that we cannot suffice with PDFs. That if we have printed copies, then we can add these annotations and these footnotes we can write. You know, they say the comments you add to your books is like the makeup that a female puts on. Like how it when a female, when she puts her lipstick and she puts up all her makeup, it enhances her beauty. When you have to put all your own notes in a book, then it enhances the beauty of that book. Or for us, you can say it's like the spices that you put in your food. So Sheikh Awamam, in his copy of Fathul Bari, over the years, he added so many notes that now he regards his copy to be so valuable and dear to him that he says that if a person has to offer him the whole world in exchange of his copy of Fathul Bari, he will not accept it. So at least in every topic, if you have one main book like this where you add all your notes, then inshallah it will be very beneficial. You know, Imam Zuhri rahimahullah, he was known for his amazing memory. Imam Layth rahimahullah, he said, كان ابن شهاب يقول ما استودعت قلبي شيئا قط فنسيته. That I haven't placed anything in my heart ever and then forgot it. Yet, so this is the memory he had. Yet Abu Zinad rahmallah, he said, وَكَانَ ابْنُ شِهَابِ يَكْتُبُ كُلَّ مَا سَمِعَ. That Ibn Shihab rahmallah, he would write whatever he heard. So even those of you, mashallah, who have photographic memories, it's advisable that you should also make notes. So coming back to the topic, besides all that I mentioned thus far, even if we accept and consider that the first narration of Sahih al-Bukhari is Aziz, we say, okay, that maybe there were multiple narrations in every link, which is not the case, but just if we have to assume so. Then on page 205 of his commentary, Mullah Ali Qari rahimahullah, he quotes from Allama Buqai rahimahullah, وَكَانَ آخِرَ حَدِيث مَذْكُورْ فِيهِ. The same applies to the last narration. That means that the last narration of Sahih Bukhari is also transmitted with solitary narrators. So in the last narration, only Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu narrated it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then وَتَفَرَّدَ بِهِ عَنْهُ أَبُو زُرْعَةَ. Only Abu Zur'a, Abdullah ibn Abdul Karim al-Makhzumi al-Razi, he narrated it. Then وتفرد به عنه عمارة بن القعقاع. That عمارة بن القعقاع is the only one who narrated it. وتفرد به عنه محمد بن الفضيل وعنه انتشر. From him it proliferated, it spread. But besides the first and the last narrations of Sahih al-Bukhari, there are 200 narrations in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim that are gharib, that have only one person in a particular link in the chain. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he mentioned in his nukat of Muqaddamah ibn Salah, بل فيهما قدر 200 حديث قد جمعها الحافظ ضياء الدين المقدسي في جزء مفرد. That in both in Bukhari and Muslim there are 200 narrations which have a single narrator in a particular link. And he says that Hafiz Diyauddin al-Maqdisi, he gathered all of this in an independent booklet. So I don't know whether this here is printed. Yeah, again, probably one of you can embark on this project and try to find out if this book of Allama Diyauddin Maqdisi rahmallah is printed. If it's not printed, then you can research and find out whether there are manuscripts available. And if you've managed to find the manuscripts, then you can type it out. Otherwise, for this, you don't even have to find his kitab. You can go through Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim yourself, and then you can check which narrations have only one narrator in a particular link. Then you gather those narrations and you publish it in an independent booklet. And if you write a commentary on them, then all the more better. Then probably one day if a teacher is teaching Nuzha an-Naḍar, then he'll make reference to your book. He'll come to this here, to this text, and then he'll say, look, that even though this Ibn al-Arabī made this claim, so and so gathered all the narrations and wrote this book. Nevertheless, it's definite that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah did not stipulate that a narration has to have a minimum of 2 narrators in every link, then only it will be sahih. So thus far we have proven that we have proven 2 things: that it's not conditioned for a narration to be aziz, then only it will be sahih. That's the first thing. That it doesn't mean that only if there are 2 narrators in every link, then the narration will be sahih. And the second thing that we have proven, it is not conditional for a narration to be aziz, then only Imam Bukhari rahimahullah will narrate it. And that brings us to the end of this. Jazakumullah khairan for staying extra time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for all your sacrifice. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa